Good day. Amidst all the drama of events going on around the world, it's easy to forget, and perhaps understandable to forget, that a meeting took place on 25th May 2021 of the European Council. The European Council is the highest decision-making body of the European Union. It is the summit meeting which brings together the heads of state or government of the various member states. It is chaired by European Council President Charles Michel, who is in theory or nominally the so-called President of Europe, and it is where the big decisions that affect the direction of the European Union are made or are supposed to be made. Once upon a time, not so long ago, I can remember that European Council meetings or European Summit meetings, as they used to be called, were big events and were extensively covered by the media. It is a sign of the growing irrelevance of the European Union in international affairs that this is no longer the case to a very great degree. And the meeting, which took place on 25th May 2021, was not only no exception to that, but it was also a good example of why it is becoming increasingly difficult around the world to take the European Union seriously. The reason is that nothing of any substance was agreed or decided at this meeting. In fact, what we get instead are indications that some major quarrel took place. Let me say a few things first about the context or the background to this meeting. It was convened with the purpose of deciding EU policy towards Russia. And it's quite clear that the European leaders anticipated that there would be divisions and that European Council President Charles Michel expected that there would be a major row. He took the extraordinary step before the meeting of ordering all the meeting participants, including people like Angela Merkel and Emmanuel Macron, to leave all their phones, their mobile phones and other electronic devices behind them outside the room when they went inside to discuss what they would do. And the reason he gave was that he didn't want anybody to be able to use those devices to eavesdrop on what was being discussed. But in truth, I think it is far more likely that he didn't want anybody at that meeting to make a recording of what was said, or perhaps to communicate surreptitiously via a mobile phone or another electronic device with someone else. When things like that happen, it is a clear indication that some sort of a row was anticipated and perhaps took place. Now, why should this be so? Well, it's become increasingly clear that the European Union cannot make up its mind and decide what it wants to do about the biggest country in Europe, which is, of course, Russia. On the one hand, you have a strong bloc of countries that remain implacably hostile to Russia, that want to ramp up sanctions against it, that would not be sorry to see a total breakdown of relations with Russia, and which want Russia to be classified by the European Union as a straightforward enemy. The countries that make up this group are Poland, Romania to some extent, the Baltic states, Sweden. The Netherlands apparently joins in with them from time to time, and so apparently also from time to time does the Czech Republic. However, there is another bloc of countries that takes exactly the opposite view, that thinks that policies towards Russia have come to a complete dead end, and that it's time now to start putting aside the acrimony and to try and chart some kind of way forward by reopening a dialogue with that country. The leader of this group is President Emmanuel Macron of France, but other countries that are known to share similar perspectives include Italy and Spain, Greece, some of the Balkan states, including Slovenia and Croatia, Hungary, and a couple of others. Germany tends to shift between the two groups. Sometimes it sides with hardliners, sometimes it seems to edge towards the position taken by Macron. On this occasion, it's quite clear that Germany, still led by the Sphinx-like figure of Angela Merkel, shifted somewhat to Macron's side. Like Macron, Merkel seems to have spoken out against taking a more hardline view of Russia and seems to have accepted that the time has come to re-examine relations and to try and edge a way forward towards re-establishing some kind of dialogue. Needless to say, no decision, however, emerged from the meeting. The only thing that was decided was to shuffle off the decision to a further meeting in July. An excuse was found in the episode in Belarus with the plane, the Ryanair plane that was diverted to Minsk airport, and the arrest there by the Belarusian authorities of Roman Protasevich, the Belarusian activist about whom we have been hearing so much. One of the reasons the European Union had such an enormous tantrum over that affair was that it provided the European leaders at their summit meeting, their council meeting, with a perfect opportunity to sound off on something whilst concealing the fact that on the main issue, supposedly under discussion, relations with Russia, they were unable to agree. However, it's nonetheless interesting that Merkel herself, who, as I said, appears to have sided with Macron in this meeting in urging a better dialogue with Russia, went out of her way a few hours later to make clear that on this occasion the European Union had no information and no reason to believe that Russia had been involved in the Ryanair Belarus incident. Anyway, the only decision that was made was, as I said, to kick the can down the road, something the European Union nowadays always does, leave it supposedly to a further meeting in July, and in the meantime, ask the hapless and completely incompetent European EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs, Josep Borrell, to write a report on what European policy towards Russia would be. This is, of course, the same Josep Borrell who went to Moscow in February with the intention of reading the Russians the Riot Act and giving them a stern lecture over matters like the arrest of the Russian dissident blogger Alexei Navalny, and who got a dusty answer in response. One should not expect much in the way of new thinking from someone like him. One person came out of this meeting, however, both encouraged and one senses frustrated by, first, by the sign that things were starting perhaps to shift a little in his favour, but also frustrated by the enormous difficulties he continues to face in trying to get the European Union to accept reality on this one issue, which is relations with Russia. That person is Emmanuel Macron of France. After the meeting, he gave a press conference in which he said some remarkable things, remarkable not in terms of their truth, which to any objective person is self-evident, but remarkable in that he dared to say them, given the overwhelmingly powerful anti-Russian narrative that has had Europe in its grip, or at least the EU in its grip, for many years now, ever since it crystallized over the events in Ukraine in 2014. And this is what Macron said about relations with Russia at that press conference following the EU Council meeting and in response to questions. He said this: "I think that we are at a moment of truth in our relationship with Russia, which should lead us to rethink the tension that we decide to put in place." And then he was asked directly, about what he would do in relation to Navalny, and he replied, "What would you like us to do? Do we start an armed conflict? Do we completely cut off relations? Do we go further with sanctions? But where to?" And then he went on to say about sanctions with Russia, the policy of progressive sanctions on frozen situations is no longer an effective policy. That is the closest any EU leader has come to saying what by now ought to be self-evidently true, that the sanctions policy against Russia has failed. It has not changed Russian policy on any significant issue. Russia has adjusted to living with the sanctions, and its economy is now starting to grow. Well, not just starting to grow, is growing despite the sanctions. And in the meantime, all the policy of hostility directed at it by the West has achieved is to persuade it to forge an ever closer relationship with China, which is not in the West's interests. Macron is stating the obvious, but obviously it is an obvious that some people in Poland, in the Baltic states, in Sweden, to some extent in Romania, to some extent in the Netherlands, to some extent in the Czech Republic, don't want to hear. Well, what will come of this report by Josep Borrell? Will we actually see any forward movement in July at this further meeting, which is going to take place in July? My prediction is we're going to see nothing. I cannot imagine Borrell saying or doing anything between now and that meeting in July which is going to land him in any degree of political difficulty. He was badly stung by the criticism he got when he returned to Europe after that disastrous visit to Moscow, which took place in February. So I predict he will return. He will write a report which this time will go out of its way to avoid controversy. That means maintaining the anti-Russian status quo, which Macron says, and says so clearly and so straightforwardly, is leading Europe nowhere. This would be sad and pathetic if it were not so similar to everything else that the European Union now does. It is an institution that is caught in limbo on its economic policies, on its migrant policies, on its policies of integration, and of course on its relationship with Russia. It can either move forward, change or retreat from failed positions, reconsider positions it has taken, or carry out any degree of significant structural change. It is stuck, and all the indications are that it will continue to be. That someone as dedicated and as committed to the ideal of Europe, I would say to the utopia that he imagines a Europe to be, as Macron is expressing his frustration in such strong words, speaks for itself. The fact that European Council President Charles Michel felt that he had to take the precaution of telling the European leaders to keep their phones, to leave their phones outside the room where they meet before holding a discussion on such a seminally important topic as Russia also speaks for itself. It speaks, frankly, louder than any words of hot air that come out of these meetings. Thank you for joining me for this video on this topic. Please join us on future videos on similar topics, both on this channel and on our main channel that you ran, where I do programs with my colleague and friend, Alex Christoforou. Please also check out Alex's channel, which you will find links to under this video. Please also check us out on our other platforms, BitChute, Library, Odyssey, Rumble, SuperU, and Locals. And please also, to the extent that you feel able, check us out or support us via PayPal, Patreon, and Subscribestar. Don't forget also to go to our shop and to buy the amazing things there, our amazing magic mugs, our t-shirts, our sweatshirts, our hats, our hoodies, and all the rest. And last but not least, check your subscription and press the like button if you like this video. Thank you very much, and I look forward to you joining me again in future videos on this channel.